the letter is from the House Committee on Oversight and Reform, Chairwoman Carolyn B. Maloney. It says, Chairs Maloney and Lynch call on social media companies to address violent threats against federal law enforcement. This is dated August 19, 2022. And then it says next to a press release, and under it, spike in threats follows Republican rhetoric on Mar-a-Lago search. Okay, so and they're already starting to play the politics game because they're blaming Republicans. It says they sent these letters to social media companies Meta, Twitter, TikTok, Truth Social, Rumble, Getter, Telegram, and Gab. Interesting, YouTube is not on this list. What else? What else am I missing that's not on this list that is a popular social media platform? Well, anyway, YouTube's not on it. That's interesting to me. All right. So let's flag that one. So the bold here says, we are concerned that reckless statements by the former president and Republican members of Congress have unleashed a flood of violent threats on social media that have already led to at least one death and pose a danger to law enforcement officers across the United States. We urge you to take action, immediate action, to address any threats of violence against law enforcement that appear on your company's platforms. So once again, that last sentence is really important. We urge you to take immediate action to address any threats of violence against law enforcement that appear on your company's platforms, wrote the chairs. What does that mean exactly, threats of violence? I think that's the first question I have reading this. Do they mean someone saying, you know, the FBI should be disbanded, or I hate the FBI? Like, what is that? I mean, honest question, because like I've said before, like I don't want any law enforcement to be targeted and, you know, injured or killed because people are angry over what happened at Mar-a-Lago. Like, I'm not advocating for that at all. But I also have questions about what they mean by this, because as we've seen in the past, they'll say words like extremism, hate speech, you know, false information, misinformation, extremism. Did I already say that one? They just get used, like they just get thrown around. So do they mean somebody that's like planning an attack, like using the platform to plan an attack? Or are they saying, you know, you can't say down with the FBI? I don't, you know, I want someone to take down the FBI. I don't know what they mean by that. I'm not really quite sure what the threat is. What do they mean specifically? And then just to go down to, they name a couple of specific instances where they say that law enforcement was targeted, including an attempted breach of the FBI's Cincinnati field office. They also, this is the interesting thing, I think, when they're talking about issuing a joint intelligence bulletin warning about a sharp rise in threats. This, they have a link, so you can say, well, what was the joint intelligence bulletin warning about a sharp rise in threats against federal law enforcement? And if you click on it, this is what it goes to: an NBC News article. They go to an NBC News article. Under that, it says that the president of the FBI Agents Association warned that the threats against FBI agents are real and imminent. Well, and then they have another link here, warned that the threats against FBI agents are real and imminent. If you click on that, it goes to 11 News, which is local CBS news station owned by Gray News. So, and then they're just quoting CNN. In that letter, when they're linking to like their facts to back up the joint press release, or joint intelligence bulletin, or the FBI Agents Association is sending out a warning, they're linking directly to corporate news, not their websites or I don't know, documents, government documents, public disclosure that we can read for ourselves. It just goes straight to the corporate news articles, which you know, again, often are just like recycling government talking points. I thought that was interesting, that their links to backing up their information are corporate news articles. Just flagging that for everybody. Again, to go to the way it ends, another bold section here. The committee strongly supports the First Amendment rights of all Americans to speak out about the actions of their government and law enforcement matters, including on social media platforms. Let me read that again. The committee strongly supports the First Amendment rights of all Americans to speak out about the actions of their government and law enforcement matters, including on social media platforms. We know that's total BS, but However, threats and incitements of deadly violence are unacceptable and against the law. The committee is seeking to understand how your company responds when users post threats against law enforcement, how your company plans to prevent your platform from being used to incite violence against law enforcement personnel, and whether legislative reform is necessary to protect law enforcement personnel and increase coordination with federal authorities. So we need to know what you're doing, and we need to know if we need to do anything to lock down what you're doing, including legislative reform, more laws, and coordinating more with the federal authorities that people are already very concerned about. So anyway, that sounds like a winning policy. So remember the sentence, the committee strongly supports the First Amendment rights of all Americans to speak out about the actions of their government and law enforcement matters. Okay, including on social media platforms. That's what they're saying. They support the First Amendment rights. Now, some people might say you don't have a First Amendment right to speak on these social media platforms. They're private companies, whatever. But anyway, they're saying that. They're saying that they support your First Amendment right. The chairwoman of the committee, Carolyn B. Maloney. Okay, I look her up. All right, because I'm asking myself, I want to know, is this true? Does this committee? I mean, does this chairwoman, Carolyn B. Maloney, does she have any history of supporting speech on these big tech platforms, or is there more news out there about her not supporting that? And so I find this press release, oversight Republicans again demand emergency hearing on big tech censorship. And this is from December 15, 2020. It says that they're calling on Chairwoman Carolyn Maloney again to hold an emergency hearing regarding big tech censorship after both Hunter Biden and the Biden-Harris transition team acknowledged that Hunter Biden is under federal investigation regarding his taxes. Days before the election, an article by the New York Post released information about Hunter Biden's lucrative foreign business dealings that raise potential conflicts of interest, but Facebook and Twitter censored it, and Twitter even locked the Post's account. Then it has a quote, and it shows you the letter, basically, that they sent to Carolyn Maloney, asking her to hold an emergency hearing. And in October, it says, all oversight Republicans called on Chairwoman Maloney to hold an emergency hearing on big tech censorship of certain news and conservative views, but she refused to hold a hearing. So she refused to hold a hearing on censorship. That's what this is saying in October. This was released in December. When you read this letter that was just sent about threats to federal law enforcement, and they're like, no, we support your First Amendment right, and it's the chairwoman penning it, basically, like, no, we totally support your First Amendment right, but then you go back in history, in time, a couple of years, and you're like, oh, wait, she's refused to hold hearings on censorship. The question is, I don't know, maybe she likes it. Gab releases its response and says that they're considering what they're going to say. I mean, this is their response to the Gab community, not to Congress, saying, hey, we're considering what we're going to say in response. They want people to know that they cooperate with law enforcement on public safety matters regularly, never comment on non-public communications with law enforcement, even when it would be convenient to do so for public relations purposes, such as today, or in any response to Congress we may choose to send at a later date. The House letter makes reference to a Gab user who posted threats against law enforcement on our platform. The implication of the letter is that we are somehow complicit in those threats. And those posts and questions were made on or about August 11th, and an arrest was made August 15th. In that case, as the now public affidavit supporting the arrest warrant states, we received an emergency data request for the subject through our law enforcement disclosure portal. We responded within 1 minute to inform the FBI the issue is being actioned. Responsive records were provided to the FBI by 8:20 or 130 minutes later. And then basically say they're way faster than Twitter or Facebook, whose platforms, on whose platforms far more threats against law enforcement can be found. We don't scream about how seriously we take public safety. We don't publicize it. We don't use it to make political statements. We just do the work. Try to be responsible as corporate citizen as we can and provide all lawful assistance to law enforcement as efficiently as we can, given the Gab is a small business with limited resources. We like to think that we do a good job at this. Anyway, so they're, like I said, they're considering their formal response, but they're basically saying, we did what we were supposed to do. So what more do you want? They're saying we've we got the information, and within a minute, we responded to it, and we're doing the best we can. Like, what else is there? And I think that's a fair question to ask, too. If they're working behind the scenes, not just Gab, but these social media platforms we know are working behind the scenes regularly with law enforcement and with Congress, because they're constantly doing their back room information gathering stuff. We learned a little bit about that with Twitter, for instance, through Alex Berenson's disclosures and talking about how they have these calls. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? So that kind of stuff is happening. So it just makes you question, like, what was the point of this letter? What is the point of the letter? Is the point of the letter, best case scenario, you believe what they're saying? Like, there's not enough being done online and there's too many threats and we got to figure out what to do, and maybe we need legislative reform. That's what they're saying. Or, on the other side of the spectrum, this is theater to keep putting pressure on speech online. This is the new threat, and there's going to be another one down the road, and the laws are already there. Don't need new laws. The companies are already working with them. How are they going to work harder? I guess by kicking off more users, cracking down even more on community guidelines. I'm not quite sure. Again, thought it was interesting YouTube was not included in the list. But I think it's fair to ask why, what's going on here. You don't have to go down a really dark rabbit hole to just consider that it's possible that this is just the next step in what started out as hate speech 5 or 6 years ago. Anyway, you're probably thinking to yourself, I need a drink after this video. And the good news is I have just the drink for you. If you check out AllisonWinePromo.com, you get 50% off of my favorite Malbecs from Argentina and 50% off of shipping. I am 8 months pregnant right now, so it's up to you to toast in my honor. There is one from almost 9,000 feet, another one that comes from a very small operation where they handpick the grapes. The third in the trio is a wine where they use natural fermentation to produce it. So very unique wines, can't get them at the grocery store, and it's a great way to support my work. If you're already drinking wine, go to AllisonWinePromo.com. You can do both, drink wine and support my work. However, if you are a coffee or tea drinker, that's cool too. You can also support my work by going to TwinEngineCoffee.com/Allison. That's TwinEngineCoffee.com/Allison. Choose from a wide variety of high altitude, USDA certified organic Nicaraguan roast. There's light roast, there's dark roast, a limited black edition right now. There's also a Caturra tea, which I tell people about all the time. I love the Caturra tea. It's tea made from the fruit around the coffee bean, and you can brew it like an iced tea, actually, or a hot tea if you like, but for summer, it's a great iced tea version. And I 24-hour cold brew mine. I also am thinking about making kombucha out of it. So just some ideas out there. Again, supporting my sponsors is a great way to keep my content coming. So if you're already drinking wine or coffee or tea, then go to AllisonWinePromo.com, TwinEngineCoffee.com/Allison, and I'll see you next time.